Hey guys, it's Melissa here from melissaoatman.com. Welcome to another episode of Awaken Your Inner Awesomeness. I am so delighted that you're here with me today. We have a very special guest with us. Today we have with us Mr. Claude AnShin Thomas. He's a Zen Buddhist monk, an author of two books, a combat Vietnam veteran, and he is the founder of the Zaltho Foundation. And he is here today to talk to us about his books, about how to live your life without having to suffer, because many people who go through traumatic experiences find that it creates a lot of suffering for them in their own lives. So we're going to tap into his wisdom today, and I cannot wait to do that. So thank you all for joining me, and thank you so much, Claude AnShin, for being here today.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me on your show.
Absolutely. It's such a pleasure. And I'm very impressed by the work that you've done because I think it is so very important. I know personally people who have been in the Vietnam War and it was very traumatic for them. And so I am very, very grateful to you for the work that you're doing to help veterans.
Thank you. The engagement that I have with people who served in the military and who have served in combat theaters and in combat itself is not limited to Vietnam. I have the privilege of being able to engage with men and women that have served in a number of conflict areas, and my engagement with former soldiers is not restricted just to the U.S. I've had somehow or other I've gained a reputation. I've been invited into South America. I've traveled before COVID. I was traveling regularly to Colombia and to Chile, to Ecuador, to Bolivia. And in these places, I was working with for example, in Colombia, working with, it didn't matter to me what faction a particular individual who was involved in fighting represented, and that they weren't fighting, and that they were having then to live with the consequences of that was of importance to me, because if the real issues of how we are impacted by our military experience are not acknowledged and addressed in some way, they continue to have ripple effects throughout society and culture.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, my combat service, my combat service was a result of the ripples that came through past generations. My father was a combat soldier. My grandfather was a combat soldier. My great-grandfather was a combat soldier. And they go forward into future generations. Directly, for example, my son has not served in the military. And not because I pushed him away from that. I didn't. My son is a commercial airline pilot, and he still wears a uniform. And it was a certain point of time when he thought the only way he could get pilot training was through the military, and I just encouraged him to do research. And I was candid with him about what I experienced as the truth, that the truth that we cannot escape unscathed from our military service. Mm-hmm. We just can't. It's just not possible. Yes, it's true that people are affected in varying degrees. But what I watch, what I see unfolding. So here in the United States, I'll talk about this. At last count, somewhere between 17 and 22 veterans a day were committing suicide. I haven't seen any current numbers, so I'll hold with that. If that number was only 2, that's still too many.
Absolutely.
Then the largest percentage of that group are between 50 and 70. It's not the current crop of veterans, although that there is an increasing number of suicides among active duty military and those who have recently served. But of that number, 17 to 22, the large percentage are between the ages of 50 and 70. And so what that's saying is that, like in my own case, I didn't know what I didn't know. And I thought that the chaos and instability of my life were just the result of it was just part of life. I didn't understand the way that I had been affected, the way I had been morally injured, and the way that moral injury was expressing itself. Post-traumatic stress being fitting under that umbrella of moral injury. So it, at a certain point, after addressing what I saw as the major dysfunctions in my life, I was suddenly face to face with the truth of my service. And the awakening to that was destabilizing. It was excruciatingly painful and confusing to really confront the truth, not my imagination of the truth, but how I was affected, the role that not only my combat service played, but the role that my father's combat service played in my life, and my grandfather's combat service, the role that played in my life. So I'm dealing with not only my own, but the transgenerational effects of war, violence, and suffering. And if somebody doesn't want to live differently, no matter what is presented to them, they're not going to change. Mm-hmm. If they're not willing to wake up, if they want to just maintain what they think is this safety that they've created, this a lot of people have created a certain sort of envelope of safety around them. The Greeks have a word for this. They call it themis. And so creating this veil of safety around me, I think that I'm okay. But eventually something happens to penetrate that veil of themis. Something happens to a child, a job is lost, or retirement comes about, or if a person is married, then their spouse, something may happen to their spouse, or there could be a divorce, or suddenly there's a discovery of substance abuse and the real cost of substance abuse, and all of a sudden that protective veil that we've created around ourselves begins to crumble, and we're face to face with the truth of our service, which is quite destabilizing. And without a discipline, without some sort of discipline in our life, and I refer to it as a disciplined spiritual practice, not religious, then being able to sort of navigate the complexities of this process of awakening are challenging.
Yes. And I know that just having PTSD is a very challenging thing in and of itself, because my own children have experienced it, not because of war or being in the military, but I understand how challenging that can be. And so you've created this foundation. So tell us a little bit about this Alto Foundation.
I'm glad to do that. Thank you for asking. I would, however, like to address 2 points before I talk about the foundation.
Sure.
One of the points that you mentioned is that what I attempt to pass on to people is what was passed on to me, is that the absence of suffering doesn't mean that that suffering somehow goes away. Mm-hmm. What I help people to discover is a path to living at peace with their unpeacefulness. So if a lot of the struggles happen with the people that I meet because they want the 10 easy steps that will take away that will take away all of this, what they deem as uncomfortable. And that's just simply not, I don't think that's the truth of life. So what I really make an effort to be clear with people about is that I'm not offering them a panacea. What I'm offering them are it's a disciplined approach to life that when they are confronted by their suffering, whatever it is, that they have the tools to be able to hold steady in the midst of that, and it will pass. In the beginning, it seems like it will never pass. But as we begin to have more experience with not rejecting that suffering as it creeps into our life or not allowing it to define us, we begin to develop emotional muscles, emotional strength. And so that suffering, when it shows itself, it doesn't last as long. Also, post-traumatic stress. Those of us who live with post-traumatic stress, we are not disordered. Our response to the world makes absolute sense based on the truth of our experiences. And I think it's, so everyone I engage with, I give them that information. I go, look, man, you are not disordered. We are not disordered.
Yeah.
It's not a cycle. There's a psychological component to how we're affected, but it's not purely psychological. And I think the underlying process to learning to live at peace with our unpeacefulness is a spiritual process, not religious, spiritual. So as you introduced, I'm a Zen Buddhist monk. I'm fully ordained in a Japanese Zen Buddhist tradition. However, when people come into retreat with me, particularly veterans, my purpose is not to convince or convert, but rather offer tools to them that have been passed on to me that really serve me well, that aren't anything other than daily life. It's how we approach daily life. Now, the Zaltho Foundation, originally I created the foundation as a way to raise money to support Vietnam veterans to go back to Vietnam, because I heard that the process was quite cathartic for a number of men and women. However, most of the people that I knew, not everyone, but a majority of the people that I knew who had served just didn't have the resources.
Right.
So I was able to establish a 501c3, and the intent was that if people were to donate money to support veterans going back to Vietnam, they could get a tax rebate. So it would be an incentive for them to donate. However, this foundation has grown far beyond my wildest imaginations. And it's grown as a result of the dedicated and hard work of the members who are currently on the board. Once I became ordained, I had to step back from any official capacity with the board. But I will say that the board of directors of the Zaltho Foundation, and they're listed on the Zaltho Foundation website, and they're listed as a biography on them. All of their services are donated, and they are an extremely talented and gifted group of people. So it's what we do. What the foundation does is extensive. It's just not. We don't work just with veterans. We engage with the homeless community. We engage with we are actively engaged with communities at large to bring a meditation practice, to bring the tools of a meditation practice into a wide variety of communities, not restricting it to just those who want to come to a temple or to a church or so, but take meditation practice out into the community, and to really be clear with people that meditation is not something that can be taught. what I can relay to them are form and function. And if they are steady with form and function, then the reality of meditation will begin to show itself to them. And it is the most powerful tool that I have ever experienced. And in my case, what I offer is free. I mean, everything I do, because of my vows, everything I do for free. However, the foundation cannot exist, and we cannot do the work we do without the support of a larger community who are very blue collar in nature, and so we make an effort to take the donations that are given to us, and they go exactly into action.
That's amazing. And I know when you're talking about meditation too, that your latest book is also about meditation, correct? Yes, bringing meditation to life. Tell us more about that.
It was very interesting. So I've had the privilege of having 2 books published, and considering my background, it's for me, it's just quite surreal. Because at a certain point in my life, I was living on the streets, homeless, in an abandoned car in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in an alleyway between 2 major streets. And I thought that my life was good. And to have come from that place to be sitting here talking with you, an author of 2 books, and having the opportunity to interact with the sorts of people that I'm privileged to interact with, and to have been the founder of a foundation that's grown beyond my imaginations, that's doing this amazing sort of work in the world, it's really just, the only thing I can attribute it to is first I had to stop taking intoxicants and stay stopped. And I had to stop getting high, man. That was getting in my way. And at that point, my life I had an opportunity then to experience life more directly. That led me to Zen practice, which led me to the tool of breath awareness, which led me to the understanding that for my life, I'm responsible. If I want the world to be different, then I need to be different. I need to live differently. I need to be the peace I want to see in the world. So it's not about getting the world to conform to my ideas of it, but wake up to the roots of war, violence, and suffering in me. The other book, may I?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, the first book that I had the privilege to publish, At Hell's Gate, A Soldier's Journey from War to Peace. Now, I did not set out to write a book. It was never my intention. At Hell's Gate came about. So as I was first waking up to how I was affected by war, as I was first waking up to the roots of war, violence, and suffering in me, and like the only way I could seem to give voice to that voicelessness, what I couldn't say, was through writing. I didn't know how to talk about this stuff. So I just started to write. So there was an accumulation of writings. And then I was approached by a man who's now become very successful. He has a publishing company, Idea Architects. And he approached me and said, he'd heard me do a talk out in California, and he asked me if I'd ever thought about writing a book. And I said, well, no. No. Other people had suggested that. And he said, well, do you have anything written? I said, yes. And he said, send it to me. I sent it to him. And then he and I worked together to get it organized. And then he shopped it. And I remember the first time somebody asked me if I had material that was written and would I send it to them. It was a person who had come to a talk that worked for a publishing house. They told me I couldn't write. And there would probably be another 10 or 12 years and a lot of hard work before I could learn how to write. What's amazing about this particular book is that people gravitate it because they say it's so well written. It's interesting
There
how
you
things are.
go.
I must also say, though, the editor of the book, who's also now a board member, they don't work as an editor anymore. Really, I owe a deep debt of gratitude to them. The work that they did with me on this book was not that they wanted it to be different than it was. They would say to me, look, how can you say this more clearly? And said, give me some. So I would write some more. And then we went through that process. They really gained my trust through that process. They wanted the book to be my book, to be my words. And so it's really a solid reflection. Now we move on to bringing meditation to life. The same editor, who's now a board member, who's not technically not an editor anymore, approached me and said, did you ever consider doing a book of quotes or sayings? And I said, well, I don't collect my quotes and sayings. I go, that's just not something I do. It seems a little, to me, it would seem a little self-absorbed, just from my perspective. But they said, well, what about other people? Are there people who've collected quotes or been sort of inspired by something you've said or something you've written? I said, I have no idea. And then they said, well, why don't we send out an email to the immediate students or people on the Zaltho mailing list and see what comes back. And so crafted an email, sent it out, and people started sending in these quotes and things that they'd heard that they were inspired about, notes that they'd taken. And so out of that, the book was crafted. And so that's how bringing meditation to life came into place. And really, it's so important for me. I stress this constantly, that meditation and daily life are not two things.
Yes. Well, I think, you've made the point that challenges are going to happen in life. They always will. But it's not hoping to have a life where you never have challenges. It's being able to work through them and being able to control how you react to the challenges when they happen. And it sounds like that's really a lot of what you're helping people to see, is that you're going to have challenges, but the suffering, what is it? Challenges are inevitable. Suffering is optional, something like that.
I like to say suffering, our suffering never goes away. It's always present. But we don't have to suffer. It's our relationship with that suffering that determines. The more I don't want to suffer, the more I'm going to suffer. It's like the analogy I sometimes use. And I understand that quote you said. I don't quite work with it that way, but it's true in some respect. It's true. But I also think I'm cautious not to attempt to create the illusion that there is a path where you don't have to feel uncomfortable anymore, where the sort of suffering is washed away.
Sure.
Suffering is a natural condition of life. However, I don't have to suffer. For example, if I were to fall suddenly I'm walking through the forest and I step into a soft spot, and all of a sudden I discovered I'm in quicksand. The more I struggle, the quicker I sink.
Right.
If I stop struggling, I can actually move and swim in that stuff. And so this is the way I like to approach the topic of suffering. Look, I haven't slept more than 2 hours consecutively in any night since 1966. And I suffered immensely because I had this fixed idea that I was supposed to sleep a fixed number of hours per night, and that I was supposed to have no difficulty and no dreams, and on and on and on. And because it wasn't like that, the world wasn't conforming to my ideas of it. Oh, it was horrible. My life was horrible. And then once I encountered Zen training, and I began to have this, I got the information that I pass on to others, that I was washing dishes one day and looking out the window, and I just had this awareness that, okay, so I don't sleep now, what? So it's not that I don't sleep, it's like how adjust to my sleep pattern.
Yeah.
I sleep like this. And when, like even just 2 nights ago, I woke up soaked and just soaked in sweat. And I was checking my body to see if I'd been shot. Those things still visit me.
Mhm.
But now when that happens, all I have to do is just stop for a moment and reconnect, really intentionally reconnect with my breath, and I'm able to with the breath, I'm able to be less agitated, to steady myself, to realize where I'm at, and to be really thankful that that was just a dream.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I know what you're talking about when you say that you you kind of have to bring yourself back to your awareness and to get centered, because I think a lot of times we have something happen to us and we kind of get thrown off balance, and we can either really let it continue to take us down this cycle of, oh my gosh, look what happened to me, my life is so bad, and or
Yeah.
we can stop and just come back to our heart center and say, okay, I am aware that this something I didn't want to happen has happened, but I don't have to have a terrible life because something that I didn't want to happen happened. I need to come back to the present moment instead of, I think what happens to a lot of people is they get caught up in the what's going to happen 5 months from now, and they get caught up in that future.
Mhm.
What's going to happen now, instead of being aware of where they are in the present moment. And that makes it really difficult to navigate what's happening, I think.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with you more. Actually, nothing else exists except the present moment. If I spend too much time up in my head, I'm in a really bad neighborhood.
Yeah.
And so I have to be, this is why this discipline, spiritual practice that I have serves me so well. Because look, breath is free. And the other thing that I learned was, and I learned this through my monastic training, was that the past doesn't actually exist. The future doesn't actually exist. I mean, they do exist, but they exist now in this moment. And so there's nothing I can do about tomorrow. But I learned if I take care of what's right in front of me, well, whatever that means, that tomorrow it takes care of itself.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that doesn't mean that I don't have plans. It doesn't mean that I don't have ideas, but I'm cautious about locking myself into results.
Well, and I think that you said it earlier, I think a lot of people, we put unrealistic expectations on future events, on things that are going to happen. And when we do that, we end up causing, I think, a lot more suffering than what is necessary, because our reality doesn't match up to what our expectation was.
Yes, that's well said. And often I see people that attempting to get life to conform to their ideas of it. And that I understood in my own way. I understood that's because of here's a word, karma.
Yeah.
This is a word that's really common in the lexicon, but few people really understand the truth of karma. They understand it as like, okay, if I do something bad, then something bad is going to happen to me. If I do something good is going to happen to me. That's sort of true, but it might not go down like that.
Right.
That there are two different types of karma. There's the karma which I inherit from all those family generations that precede me endlessly, and from the collective conscious of which I'm a part of, the society and culture. And so whatever the society and culture is I'm engaged with, they also influence my life. There is no individual self. I'm a composite of all that karma which I have inherited. Then out of that, I act. That's the karma that I create. Now, the amazing thing about Zen practice for me was that what I learned is that I'm not trapped. I'm not trapped forever in this cycle that I felt I was trapped forever in, that I can change. Karma can be changed. Now, I have to give up my ideas about what that means. Because if I have an idea, well, I'm going to change it like this, that's not going to work.
Yeah.
That what the way karma changes is that through becoming the willingness to become more still, whatever that means to someone, concentrating on the breath, I get to see what in my life creates difficulties, and I can stop doing that stuff. I'm not driven. I mean, in unawareness, I am driven. But as I'm willing to become more aware, I am less driven by that suffering. And so I can learn to live in a different relation with it. I can just stop doing that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because I think a lot of people get stuck in doing things they don't necessarily want to do because it's what society says that they have to do. So they get stuck in marriages where they're not happy, or they're in jobs that they don't like. They picked careers, that aren't really fulfilling to them. And when you can get still and be very quiet, for me, that's when I can feel the stirrings of the divine. I refer to my higher power as the divine,
Sure.
guiding me towards the path that really is more fulfilling for me, and what, my heart really would rather be doing, rather than all of the things that I feel like I have to be doing. So I think many times we're just keeping ourselves busy for the sake of being busy.
And then at some point, as I mentioned before, like around the topic of post-traumatic stress, which is an element of moral injury, the betrayal of what is right by people in authority, in power and authority, that at some point, all of that I have, what you described is what the Greeks term as themis, creating that, attempting to conform to some idea of how life is supposed to be. And if I do that, then everything will be okay for me. And then something penetrates that, something shatters that illusion or cracks it just a bit. Suddenly I'm going, oh my gosh, people are going, oh my gosh, what's the point of my life then? Like, I've done all of this and I've done all of this for what? What's the point of this? And then bam, suicide seems like an option. Or they just say, wow, it's just like all of a sudden it's like the rug's pulled out from underneath them. I've wasted my whole life. There's no point.
Yeah.
And it's simply not true. At exactly that moment, there is an opportunity to wake up. And that's where I step in. That's just another thing. Since COVID, by vow, I'm not permitted to be residential more than 3 months a year. However, COVID,
Yeah.
that changed. But that since I've been residential, people have realized that I'm here, and that they realize my engagement and things that I've done and I'm willing to do. And so over the months, I've been called on numerous occasions for suicide interventions, often with, I must think, these calls have been exclusively either with active duty military or veterans. And but I only get called when in the manifestation of these overtures, the individuals are armed. So they reach out to me before they call the police. And so far, as you can see, I'm here. So far, no one's died, and no one's had to go to jail. There's only so much that I can do The rest is up to the individual. If the individual is not willing to do things different, it doesn't matter what I say, it doesn't matter what I offer, nothing's going to change. If an individual really wants things to be different, then absolutely everything that I present will be exactly perfect. If they're
That's
willing.
amazing. That is amazing, though. And I absolutely love that they reach out to you because um, obviously jail is not a helpful scenario for someone who is at that stage in their life. And boy, that's just such a it's a difficult subject to deal with and to talk about and to have someone feel like there is no other option than to take their life. And I know I've had personal experience with that with people in my family, and so I understand how difficult that is. And it's awesome that you can step forward and help people in that way, and that they've chosen to not go down that path, but see that yes, there is an opportunity. When you're at your lowest point, what better place is there to decide things can be different? That you
But,
can start over, it doesn't have to continue down that same path.
well, I also look at, I don't distinguish between high and low. What I say is that exactly that moment you have an opportunity. The 13th of April, 1983, I was living in Concord, Massachusetts, in a small cottage, like 500 square feet. I was sitting in front of the television and life was hopeless for me. I took 1,000 milligrams of barbiturate because it seemed like the only way. Death just seemed like a better option at the time. And I hadn't taken I didn't see, this is an interesting thing. I didn't really want to die. I just didn't know how to live.
Mm-hmm.
So although my door was shut and locked, I didn't take a phone off the hook. That was before cell phones. They had, they still had and then a dial phone. I had the dial phone style, but with push buttons.
Yeah.
But I didn't take the phone off the hook, and somebody called me. I don't remember this. I answered the phone. They understood what was going on. They called 911, and the police came. And when they got there, I was told later that I was already in cardiac arrest. This was before Narcan or anything. So I survived that. And I was, once I got out of intensive care, I was in a sort of a one step down from intensive care. I still had wires and stuff on me. And so three or four men came to visit me. And one of these men asked me if I was going to do it again. And I said, you bet. I said, anything has got to be better than the life that I have. He looked at me and said, how do you know? He said, it could be worse.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, it was just, there was something about what he said, and it just was one of those moments. And it just was piercing, that thought. And I just went, holy cow, worse than this? I better do something about this. Now, I didn't right away, but it's what led me to a drug and alcohol treatment center. And it sort of set me on that path. And I have never looked back. Even though this path is full of doubt for me, I often wonder if because I live a very non-conventional life.
Mm-hmm.
And if I look at traditional society and culture, and I still have those ruminations. Is what I'm doing worth anything? I mean, I don't have a job, I don't have a retirement, I don't have all the stuff that I'm supposed to have to make this show that I had a productive life. And so I'm still visited by those ruminations. And then all I have to do is stop and come back to my breath and just reflect on where I was and where I am, and the opportunities that are presented to me as I have discovered through this process that what I used to perceive as my greatest liabilities have in some ways become my greatest asset. It's how I work with them.
Yeah, and look at all of the lives that you're touching and changing in what you're doing, and that's amazing. And I think that that is a problem that many people have, is that maybe what they really would love to do doesn't conform to society's expectations.
I think that, yes, I think that's certainly a major factor. The other thing, though, is I look at not so much for example, when I go out, if I get called on a suicide intervention, or if I walk into a homeless encampment, it's not what I can do for them, but what they do for me. Because in my engagement with the people in these circumstances, bring me in contact with my conditioning, that remind me of where I came from. And like when I engage with the homeless encampments and people living in these encampments, I'm not there to help them. I have no idea what they need. What I'm there is to build relationships. It's not me helping them. It's like, okay, I want to know who you are, what your story is, talk to me, get to know me. And as I get to know them, as we get to know one another, then they begin to trust me. And then I began to see where we can be of support. And generally the foundation is not so much a direct, this foundation doesn't do so much direct support, although they do some. This foundation is more a clearinghouse. So we have contacts with various agencies regarding mental health issues and issues around homelessness and medical issues and who can provide financial support. We have contacts. There's enough agencies doing that sort of work, enough NGOs, enough nonprofits doing that kind of work. We don't need another one. So I identified those agencies, groups, or that are really doing good work. And so once we identify what a person needs, we can say, okay, we can send you to someone, and they will help you out. We can be sure of that. It's also true that just because a person lives outside doesn't mean their problems are all solved if they get housing. Some of them don't want that. Right. They're perfectly content with their life out there. It's how to support them where they're at.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That's awesome that you're doing that, though, because I think making connections is one of the most important things that we can do. And as a teacher, that is one of the most important things I think you do in the classroom, is making connections with your kids.
Yeah. Yes. My father was a teacher. Yeah, my first degree is in education. Yes, and it's interesting. My father's sister wanted her eldest son, and she converted to a particular religious faith, and she wanted her son to go into the priesthood of that faith. And he said, "No, man, I'm going to college." Yeah. And interesting. I was always looked at as the problem child in the family, and here I am well, I'm not a priest or a monk, but yes, interesting how the world turns.
Yes. And I find that does happen a lot. Honestly, that does happen, that the one who might be considered to be maybe the black sheep, or the one who isn't like everybody else in the family, ends up paving the way and paving the path for others too. So that's a big responsibility for sure. But I definitely want to thank you for your service, for everything that you have done, because I think that it is such an important mission. And just hearing you talk about going out and making connections with people, not trying to necessarily change them, but just trying to meet them where they are and understand what their needs are so that you can get them what they need. I think that that's very, very important.
Yeah, let them teach me.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much. This has been such a wonderful and enlightening conversation, and
You're welcome.
enjoyed it.
It's
I've
been
enjoyed
very
it
easy
so
to
much.
talk with you. Yeah, it's been really easy to talk with you. I really have appreciated the time together.
Yes, absolutely. And I would love for you to tell people if they would like to buy your books, because you
Mhm.
have two of them, or if they're interested in your foundation, maybe they want to donate, or maybe they would like to get someone some help. What's the best way for them to do that?
Um, the books are available on through a number of different venues. Um, the easiest way really to get this information is to visit the website. I'm not saying that because I'm trying to generate traffic. It's just really the simplest way, because I have like 8 different websites or so for the book and all of that.
Sure.
If you go to the website, which is zaltho.org, that's ZALTHO.org. That information is there. If you want to be in contact with me, you can also reach me through the website. Those emails get to me pretty quickly. If you want, um, uh, it's a really, the website itself is a clearinghouse. And so the information is there, and it's really, this board has recrafted and redone this website. It's amazing. If you want to get the book, like for example, a number of people, I bump into a number of people that don't like to go to Amazon.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you don't want to shop at Amazon, you don't have to. The book's available in other places, and they're listed on the website, or you can get the book directly from us. There's also a website where I also want to mention that all of the proceeds from the book, they get channeled right back into the foundation, and they go to support the work of the foundation. So none of that really comes to me. We also have the foundation has a Facebook page. And again, you can find the Facebook page under the name Zaltho, Zaltho. And there's an Instagram page. And that can also be found by just entering the name Zaltho. You cannot find me on social media. I have no social media presence. However, if you want to be in direct contact with me, if you go to the website, there's a way to write info@zaltho.org, and then those emails get passed to me.
Awesome. And we're going to have all of that information in the show notes too. So we'll have the link to the website and they can click directly to it from the show notes. So I always like to ask our guests before we leave if they could leave our listeners with one little nugget of wisdom to take with them for the day.
Yeah, I'm glad to do that. In fact, if I may, we offer formal meditation sessions and followed by recitations online on Zoom every Thursday and every Saturday. That's also listed on the website. I also do an open session of questions and responses on Sunday mornings. All times are central. I'm in Central Standard Time, so all times are Central Standard Time, and that's open. It's open to the public because it's internationally attended. And I meet with veterans Sundays at 6 p.m. Central Time. If you're interested to attend, what we ask is that you write and introduce yourself to us, and then we pass on the Zoom information to you. But the nugget, what I always close these sessions with this piece of information, that if a thing is not practical, it's not spiritual.
Love that. Thank you so very much. And that definitely resonates with me. So thank you for sharing that so much. And thank you for sharing your wisdom and everything that you do with the world. I just thank you so much for that.
You're really welcome. I wish you much luck with your podcast.
Thank you.
It's been really nice. It's been nice to spend the time with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I want to thank you guys too for being here with us today. As always, thank you for listening to this podcast. If you like it, please subscribe. Please leave a positive review from wherever you're listening. And as always, the greatest compliment you can pay me is to share this podcast with those you might think benefit from it. Don't forget that you can follow me on social media And if you want to work with me, you can go to my website, melissaoatman.com. You can also become a Patreon. You can do that at melissaoatman.com. There you get 2 extra episodes per week of this podcast, plus bonuses like guided meditations and readings. So please check it out. I hope that you guys are having a beautiful day from wherever you're listening. As always, I am sending you so much love and light, and I will talk to you soon. Bye, guys.